The coffee cup rattled against the saucer as Elena Vasquez set it down, the porcelain creating a soft percussion that echoed through the empty briefing room. She flexed her fingers, watching the slight tremor that had plagued her for 3 months now, ever since Kandahar. "You're early, Vasquez." Colonel Morrison's voice cut through her thoughts as he entered the room, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to her civilian clothes. She'd been discharged 2 weeks ago, but old habits died hard. Elena still woke at 0500 hours, still checked. Her corners still flinched at the sound of helicopters overhead. "Old habits, sir." She stood, her military bearing automatic despite everything. Morrison studied her with the calculating gaze of a man who'd sent too many soldiers into harm's way. His weathered face softened slightly as he took in her appearance, the dark circles under her brown eyes, the way she held her left hand steady with her right. "Sit down, Elena, we need to talk." The use of her first name sent a chill down her spine. In 8 years of military service, Morrison had never once called her anything but Vasquez or Sergeant. This wasn't a social visit. She remained standing. "With respect, sir, I'm a civilian now. Whatever this is, your country needs you." 4 words. That's all it took to make her stomach drop. She'd heard those words before, right before they'd sent her to Afghanistan. Right before everything went wrong. "My country discharged me," Elena said, finally sitting. The tremor in her hands intensified, and she clasped them together in her lap. "Medical reasons. Unfit for duty." Morrison pulled out a tablet, swiping to a photo that made Elena's breath catch. It was a man in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. She recognized him immediately, Senator James Hutchinson, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Senator Hutchinson's daughter, Sarah, was kidnapped 3 days ago in Colombia. Morrison's voice was clinical, professional. "The kidnappers are demanding the release of Miguel Santos." Elena's blood turned to ice. Santos, the arms dealer whose compound she'd infiltrated 8 months ago. The mission that had cost her team 2 good soldiers and left her with hands that couldn't stop shaking. "Santos is locked up in a DX Florence," she said. "Supermax. They'll never get him out." "They don't need to get him out. They just need to." "Believe we're trying." Morrison leaned forward. "The kidnappers gave us 72 hours. 68 hours ago, so you have 4 hours. What does this have to do with me?" Morrison swiped to another photo, this one an aerial view of a compound nestled in the Colombian mountains. Dense jungle surrounded the concrete buildings, and Elena could see tiny figures moving around the perimeter. Even from this height, she could make out the defensive positions. "Sarah Hutchinson is being held here. It's a fortress, Elena. 3 concentric rings of defense, motion sensors, armed patrols. The only way in is through the front gate or..." He paused, meeting her eyes. "Or through a single window on the 3rd floor of the main building." Elena studied the photo, her tactical mind automatically calculating angles and distances despite herself. "How far?" 1,200 meters. Through a triple canopy jungle, in variable wind conditions. Morrison's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "It's impossible." "Then why are you here?" "Because 3 years ago, you made a shot at 1,400 meters in similar conditions. You saved an entire platoon that day." Elena closed her eyes, remembering. The weight of the Barrett M82 against her shoulder. The moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats. The impossible shot that had taken out a sniper who was picking off her comrades one by one. But that was before Kandahar. Before the eye that had killed Martinez and Thompson while she'd watched helplessly through her scope. Before the tremor that had ended her career. "That was before," she whispered. "I know." Morrison's voice gentled. "But Elena, you're still the best long-range shooter I've ever seen. Even with the tremor, even after everything. I can't hold a rifle steady for 10 seconds. Elena snapped, holding up her shaking hands. I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn at 200 meters, let alone make a precision shot at over a kilometer. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out another photo, this one of a young woman with bright blue eyes and her father's determined chin. Sarah Hutchinson, age 22, graduate student in international relations. She'd been in Colombia doing research for her thesis on peace negotiations. She's the same age as your sister was, Morrison said quietly. Elena's chest tightened. Carmen, sweet, brilliant Carmen, who died in a car accident while Elena was deployed. The sister she'd never gotten to say goodbye to, never gotten to protect. When it mattered. That's not fair, Elena whispered. No, Morrison agreed, it's not. But it's the truth. This girl is someone's sister, someone's daughter. And she's going to die if we don't get her out. Elena stared at Sarah's photo, seeing Carmen's face superimposed over the stranger's features. The same bright intelligence, the same stubborn. Set to the jaw. Even if I could make the shot, she said slowly. Which I can't. What makes you think one bullet could save her? Morrison swiped to a blueprint of the building. Intelligence indicates she's being held in this room. He pointed to a space on the 3rd floor. The window faces southeast. Every day at exactly 1400 hours, they move her to a different room for questioning. For exactly 30 minutes, she's in a 2nd floor room with windows facing southwest. Still not following. The first shot isn't to save her, Elena. It's to signal the extraction team. Morrison looked up from the tablet. We've got a joint task force ready to go, Colombian Special Forces, Delta Force operators. But they need a distraction. Something to draw the defenders away from the main building. And the second shot? Morrison's expression grew grim. If the extraction fails, if they're about to execute her, then yes, the second shot would be to save her life. Elena understood. They were asking her to potentially kill someone to save Sarah Hutchinson. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden. I need to see. The rifle, she said. The weapons testing facility at Quantico was exactly as Elena remembered it, sterile, functional, and filled with the sharp scent of gunpowder and cleaning solvent. Morrison led her through the familiar corridors, past ranges where Marines were qualifying with their service weapons. We've prepared several options, he said, pushing open the door to Range 7, the long-distance facility. But there's one in particular I think you'll want to see. Elena stepped into the range and stopped dead. There, mounted on a bipod at the firing line, was a rifle she recognized immediately. The Barrett M82A1, the same model she'd used for her record-breaking shot 3 years ago. But this one was different, modified in ways that made her breath catch. Custom job, Morrison explained, noting her expression. We had the best gunsmiths in the country work on it. Floating barrel, custom trigger group rated down to 6 ounces, electronic scope with wind compensation and ballistic calculator built in. Elena approached the rifle slowly, reverently. The stock had been carved to fit her exact measurements. And the scope was a piece of art, German optics with smart technology that could compensate for a dozen different variables. May I? She asked. Morrison nodded, and Elena picked up the rifle, settling it against her shoulder. Immediately, she could feel the tremor in her hands transferred to the weapon. The crosshairs wavered in the scope, dancing back and forth across. The target 800 meters downrange. The electronics, Morrison said quietly, include a stabilization system. It reads micro movements and compensates automatically. Elena found the control switch and activated the system. Immediately, the crosshairs steadied, locked onto the target with mechanical precision. It was like magic. This is cheating, she murmured. This is adapting, Morrison corrected. The tremor isn't your fault, Elena. It's a symptom of what you've been through, but it doesn't define what you're capable of. Elena adjusted her position, settling into the familiar rhythm of long-range shooting. Breathe in, breathe out, find. the natural pause between heartbeats. Even with the stabilization system, muscle memory took over. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. "Range is cold," Morrison announced over the intercom. "Vasquez, you are cleared to fire when ready." Elena peered through the scope, the target crisp and clear at 800 meters. It was a standard military silhouette, but in her mind, she saw something else entirely. The face of the sniper in Afghanistan, who'd been hunting her squad. The moment when everything depended on a single shot. She squeezed the trigger. Barrett roared, the recoil punching back into her shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's impact center mass, exactly where she'd aimed. "Good shot," Morrison said, but Elena was already working the bolt, chambering another round. She fired again and again. Each shot perfect, each impact exactly where she'd intended. The stabilization system was incredible, but it was more than that. Despite the tremor, despite the months of self-doubt, her fundamentals were still solid. "I need to test it at longer range," she said, finally setting the rifle down. Morrison smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." They moved to range 12, the longest facility Quantico had. At 1,200 meters, it was almost exactly the distance she'd need to make in Colombia. Elena spent an hour adjusting the scope, calculating wind drift, and familiarizing herself with the ballistic computer built into the smart optics. "The real challenge," Morrison explained, "isn't just the distance, it's the conditions. Colombian jungle means variable wind, high humidity, and heat that can create mirage effects." Elena nodded, studying the environmental data on the scopes. "Digital display. What about the target? How big is the window?" "Approximately 1 meter by 2 meters. But Elena... Morrison hesitated. "If it comes to the second shot, the one to save her life, the target won't be the window." She looked up from the scope. "What do you mean?" "Intelligence suggests they'll use her as a human shield if the compound is breached. The shot would have to be precise enough to neutralize the threat without harming her." Elena felt her stomach clench. A precision shot with a hostage in close proximity. It was every sniper's nightmare scenario. The margin for error would be measured in inches, not feet. "That's not a shot," she said quietly. "That's a prayer. It's what we're asking you to do." Elena returned to the scope, centering the crosshairs on a target 1,200 meters away. Even with the stabilization system, even with all the technological assistance, what they were asking was at the very edge of possibility. But as she settled into her shooting position, she found herself thinking about Sarah Hutchinson's photo. Those bright blue eyes so much like Carmen's, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence that reminded Elena of her sister's passion for learning. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck exactly where she'd aimed. Center mass at 1,200 meters. "When do we leave?" she asked. "What do you think will happen next?" Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. The helicopter ride to Colombia was a blur of briefings and equipment checks. Elena sat in the back of the military transport, surrounded by the most elite soldiers she'd ever worked with. Delta Force operators with eyes like chips of ice, Colombian special forces who knew the jungle like their own backyard, and intelligence analysts who spoke in acronyms and whispered into encrypted radios. Captain Sarah Shin, the Delta Force team leader, spread satellite photos across the fold-down table between them. "Latest intelligence shows increased activity at the compound," she said, her voice cutting through the helicopter's roar. "They're expecting trouble." Elena studied the photos, counting guard positions and noting patrol patterns. "How many hostiles? Conservative estimate. 40 to 50 armed combatants. They've got RPGs, automatic weapons, and what looks like a military-grade communications array." Shun pointed to several structures within the compound. "This is essentially a small military base, not just a kidnapping operation." "Who are they?" Elena asked. That's the million-dollar question. It was Agent Marcus Webb from the CIA, a thin man with prematurely gray hair and the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much. On the surface, they're claiming to be FARC remnants, but their equipment and tactical deployment suggest something more sophisticated. Elena frowned. You think they're foreign-backed? We think this whole operation is a setup, Webb said quietly. The kidnapping, the demands for Santos's release, it's all too convenient. Too perfectly calculated to draw us in. Draw us into what? Webb and Chun exchanged a look that made Elena's skin crawl. We're not sure yet, Chun said finally. But we need to be prepared for this to be bigger than just a rescue operation. The helicopter began its descent, and Elena could see the Colombian jungle stretching endlessly below them. Dense green canopy broken only by rivers and the occasional cleared space where indigenous communities had carved out small farms. Insertion. Point is coming up, the pilot announced over the intercom. Weather report shows variable winds, gusts up to 25 knots from the southwest. Visibility is good, but expect that to change as the day progresses. Elena checked her equipment one final time. The modified Barrett was secured in a custom case, along with enough ammunition for 20 shots. Not that she'd have time for 20 shots. This was the kind of operation where you got one chance to get it right. Remember, Chun said as the helicopter touched down in a cleared area 30 kilometers from the target. You'll have 4 hours to get into position. The diversionary attack begins at exactly 1400 hours, whether you're ready or not. Elena nodded, shouldering her pack. The weight was familiar, comforting in a way. 80 pounds of gear, food, and ammunition. Enough to keep her alive in the jungle for a week if necessary. And Elena? Chun grabbed her arm as she headed for the helicopter door. If this goes sideways, if the extraction fails ... you don't have to take the second shot. No one would blame you for walking away. Elena met the captain's eyes. You're wrong, she said quietly. I would blame myself. She jumped down from the helicopter and immediately felt the jungle's embrace. The humid air was thick enough to taste, and the sounds of countless insects and birds created a wall of noise that would mask her movement perfectly. Miguel Santos, the Colombian Special Forces guide assigned to her, materialized from the tree line like a ghost. He was small and compact, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent his entire life in the jungle. Senora Vasquez, he said in accented English. I am Santos. Not the bad Santos, he added with a grin. The good Santos. Despite everything, Elena found herself smiling. How long does it take to reach the shooting position? 3 hours if we move fast, 4 if we move smart. Santos shouldered his own pack, which was nearly as large as Elena's despite his smaller frame. The jungle, she will try to kill us. Both today. Heat, snakes, maybe men with guns if we are unlucky. Let's move smart then, Elena said. Santos nodded approvingly and melted back into the jungle. Elena followed, her military training taking over as they began the trek through some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. The jungle was everything Elena had expected and worse. Within an hour, her uniform was soaked with sweat, and every step required careful attention to avoid the countless hazards hidden beneath the green canopy. Santos moved ahead of her like a shadow, occasionally stopping to point out venomous spiders or to redirect their path around areas where the ground was too soft. You see the monkeys? Santos whispered during one of their brief rest stops. They tell us when men are near. Listen. Elena tilted her head, filtering out the constant buzz of insects to focus on the monkey calls echoing through the trees. 2. Her untrained ear. It sounded like random chatter, but Santos was nodding with satisfaction. No men this way for many kilometers, he said. The monkeys, they would be quiet if there were soldiers. They continued their careful advance, Elena's respect for her guide growing with each passing hour. Santos seemed to anticipate every obstacle. leading her around the worst of the terrain while maintaining their pace toward the target. 2 hours. Into the trek, Elena's satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She checked the display and felt her blood chill. "What is it?" Santos asked, noting her expression. "Change of plans," Elena said grimly. "Intelligence reports that Sarah Hutchinson was moved to a different building within the compound. The shooting position we were heading for won't give us a clear line of sight." Santos studied the new coordinates she showed him on the GPS unit. "I know. This is very bad." "Why?" "The new position is on the ridge above the compound, very exposed. And to get there," Santos traced a route on his own map. "We must go through an area where the narcos sometimes patrol." Elena checked her watch. 2 hours until the scheduled attack. If they turned back now, there might be time to find an alternative shooting position, but it would be inferior longer range, worse angles, less chance of success. If they pressed forward to the new position, they'd have just enough time to get there before the attack began. But they'd be crossing dangerous ground with no room for error. "Your choice, Signora," Santos said quietly. "I follow where you lead." Elena thought about Sarah Hutchinson, alone and terrified in a concrete room, surrounded by armed men. She thought about Carmen and all the time she'd wished for just one more chance to protect her sister. "We go forward," she said. Santos nodded grimly and led them deeper into the jungle. The next hour was the longest of Elena's life. They moved through terrain that seemed actively hostile, razor-sharp thorns that could slice through Kevlar, streams that had to be crossed on fallen logs 30 feet above the ground, and areas where the canopy was so thick that they navigated in near-total darkness despite the midday sun. Twice, Santos held up a hand and they froze for long minutes while he listened to sounds Elena couldn't even hear. The second time, he pointed to fresh boot prints in the mud beside a stream. 4 men, he whispered. "Moving fast, maybe 1 hour ago." Elena studied the tracks, her military training automatically analyzing the tread patterns and stride length. Military boots, not local militia. "See, this is what worries me." They altered their route, adding another 20 minutes to their journey, but avoiding the area where the patrol had been moving. Elena's watch showed 45 minutes until the scheduled attack when they finally reached the base of the ridge. "From here we climb," Santos said, pointing up a steep slope covered in loose rock and tangled vegetation. "Very dangerous. If we make noise. I understand." Elena checked her rifle case one more time, ensuring it was secure on her back. "Lead the way." The climb was brutal. The loose rock shifted under their feet with every step, and more than once Elena found herself grabbing desperately for handholds as the ground tried to give way beneath her. Santos climbed with the sure-footed grace of a mountain goat, often reaching back to help her over the worst sections. 20 minutes later, they crested the ridge and Elena got her first real look at the compound below. It was exactly as the satellite photos had shown, but somehow more intimidating in person. 3 concentric rings of razor wire, guard towers at each corner, and armed patrols moving in precise patterns between the buildings. "There," Santos pointed to a large concrete structure in the center of the compound. "The main building. Your target is the 3rd floor, southeast corner." Elena pulled out her binoculars and studied the building carefully. The window was there, just as described, but it was smaller than she'd expected. At this distance, she checked her rangefinder. 1,247 meters. The window looked like a postage stamp. "You can make this shot?" Santos asked quietly. Elena didn't answer immediately. She was studying the wind patterns, watching the way the leaves moved in the trees between her position and the target. Variable winds gusting from multiple directions. Heat shimmer rising from the concrete buildings. A dozen factors that could send her bullet inches off target. "We'll find out," she said finally. She began setting up her shooting position. unfolding the bipod and finding a stable rest among the rocks. Santos disappeared back down the slope to watch for approaching patrols, leaving Elena alone with her rifle and her doubts. The tremor in her hand seemed worse in the jungle heat. Even with the rifle's stabilization system, she could see the crosshairs wavering slightly as she peered through the scope. At this distance, even a tiny movement would translate to a miss measured in feet, not inches. Elena closed her eyes and tried to center herself. She thought about her training, about the hundreds of hours she'd spent on ranges around the world, perfecting her technique. She thought about Carmen and about Sarah Hutchinson waiting in that concrete room for rescue that might never come. When she opened her eyes, the crosshairs were steady. Her satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. Extraction team in position. Attack begins in 10 minutes. Good hunting. Elena chambered around and settled in to wait. At exactly 1400 hours, the jungle exploded into chaos. Elena watched through her scope as the first grenades detonated against the compound's outer defenses. Smoke billowed from the guard towers as Delta Force operators and Colombian special forces launched their coordinated assault on the facility's eastern perimeter. The response was immediate and devastating. Automatic weapons fire erupted from defensive positions throughout the compound, and Elena could see muzzle flashes sparking from windows and rooftops as the defenders returned fire. "So far, so good," she murmured into her throat microphone. The plan was working. The assault was drawing defenders away from the main building toward the perimeter. Through her scope, she watched armed men running from the central structures toward the battle raging at the compound's edge. But not all of them. At least 6 guards remained at the main building, taking positions at windows and doorways. "Overwatch to ground team," Elena transmitted. "I count 6 hostiles remaining at primary structure. You're going to have company when you breach." "Copy, Overwatch," came Captain Chun's voice through the static. "I'm approaching the main building now." Elena shifted her scope to track Chun's team as they advanced through the compound. The Delta Force operators moved like ghosts, using smoke and the chaos of battle to mask their approach. They were good professional, efficient, deadly, but they weren't invisible. Elena saw the guard on the 2nd floor of the main building before Chun's team did. He was positioned at a window with a clear line of sight to the route the extraction team was taking. In another 10 seconds, he'd have a perfect shot at Captain Chun. "Ground team, hostile on your 2 o'clock, 2nd floor, 3rd window from the left," Elena transmitted urgently. "I don't see him," Chun's voice crackled back. Elena could see the guard raising his rifle, taking aim. The extraction team was exposed, moving across an open courtyard with nowhere to take cover. "I have the shot," Elena said. "Take it." Elena settled the crosshairs on the guard's center mass. At 1,247 meters, he looked like a toy soldier through her scope. She had to account for wind drift, bullet drop, and the fact that her target was partially concealed by the window frame. The tremor in her hand seemed to intensify, and for a moment, the crosshairs danced wildly across the target. Elena closed. Her eyes took a deep breath and activated the rifle's stabilization system. When she opened her eyes, the crosshairs were rock steady. Breathe in, breathe out. Find the pause between heartbeats. Elena squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive .50 caliber round launching downrange at over 2,800 feet per second. Elena kept her eye on the scope, tracking the shot as the bullet covered the distance to target in just over 2 seconds. The guard dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. "Target down," Elena reported. "Ground team, you're clear to advance." "Outstanding." "Shooting, Overwatch," Chun's voice came back. "We're at the building now." Elena watched through her scope as the extraction team disappeared into the main structure. Now came the waiting, the most difficult part of any sniper's job. She was a guardian angel with a rifle, able to see threats from a distance, but unable to help with the close-quarters battle raging inside the building. Minutes passed. Elena tracked her scope across the compound, looking for other threats, but the diversionary attack was doing its job. Most of the defenders were still focused on the eastern perimeter, where explosions continued to rock the facility. Overwatch. This is the ground team. Chun's voice suddenly crackled through the radio, and Elena could hear gunfire in the background. We've located the package, but we have a problem. Elena's heart sank. What kind of problem? 3 hostiles in the room. With the package. They're using her as a human shield. We can't get a clean shot. Elena swung her scope toward the third-floor window she'd been watching. Through the glass, she could just make out figures moving inside the room. Sarah Hutchinson was there, but Elena couldn't get a clear view of the situation. Can you get me a better angle? Elena asked. Negative. We're pinned down in the hallway. If we try to advance, they'll execute her. Elena studied the building through her scope, looking for alternative shooting positions or windows that might give her a different view. But the architecture of the structure worked against her. The room where Sarah was being held only had one window facing in her direction. Ground team, what are your options? Limited, Chun replied grimly. We can try to negotiate, but these guys don't seem interested in talking. They keep shouting about Santos, demanding we release him immediately. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Captain, I think Agent Webb was right. This feels like a setup. Before Chun could respond, another voice came through the radio, heavily accented English with a tone of cold authority. American soldiers, you will withdraw from this building immediately, or the girl dies. Elena adjusted her scope, trying to get a better view into the room. She could see shadows moving against the far wall, but the angle was all wrong. Even if she could see clearly, shooting through the window would be incredibly dangerous with Sarah in such close proximity to her captors. Overwatch, I need options, Chun transmitted quietly. Elena studied the building's structure, her tactical mind working through possibilities. The window was double-paned glass, which would affect bullet trajectory. The room appeared to be approximately 4 meters deep, which meant even if she could see clearly, she'd be shooting at targets that were close together in a confined space. Give me 5 minutes, Elena said. I'm going to try to reposition for a better angle. You don't have 5 minutes, the hostile voice came through the radio again. You have 1 minute to begin withdrawing, or the girl dies. Elena's hands began to shake, and this time it had nothing to do with her medical condition. This was the nightmare scenario every sniper feared, a hostage situation where one wrong move, one missed shot, could result in an innocent death. Thought about Carmen, about all the times her sister had trusted her to keep her safe. She thought about Sarah Hutchinson's parents, waiting for news of their daughter's fate. Ground team, Elena said quietly. If I take the shot, what's your assessment of success probability? There was a long pause before Chun answered. Honestly, Overwatch? I can't even see exactly where everyone is positioned. Without a clear view of the threat arrangement, ... Understood. Elena settled back behind her rifle. I'm going to try to get a better visual. She adjusted her scope's magnification to maximum power, studying every detail she could see through the third-floor window. The glass was dirty, which further obscured her view, but she could make out what appeared to be 3 figures in the room. One was definitely Sarah's smaller frame, different clothing. The other 2 had to be her captors. But from this angle, at this distance, with the window between them, Elena couldn't tell exactly how they were positioned relative to each other. 30 seconds, the hostile voice announced over the radio. Elena's mind raced through the physics of the shot. Even if she could see clearly, even if she knew exactly where everyone was positioned, shooting through glass at this distance would introduce variables that were almost impossible to calculate. The bullet might deflect slightly, might fragment, might not have enough energy left to be immediately effective. But if she didn't take the shot, Sarah Hutchinson would die anyway. "Ground team," Elena transmitted. "On my signal, can you create any kind of distraction? Flashbang, smoke, anything to disrupt their positioning? Negative, Overwatch. We're 50 meters down the hallway. Anything we do from here won't affect them." 15 seconds, came the hostile voice. Elena centered her crosshairs on the window, aiming for where she estimated the hostiles would be positioned based on the shadows she could see. It was guesswork, pure and simple. At 1,247 meters through glass, with innocent life at stake. 10 seconds, 9, 8, ... Elena's finger found the trigger. The crosshairs wavered slightly, then steadied as the rifle's stabilization system compensated for her tremor. 7, 6, 5. She thought about Carmen one last time, about the promise she'd made to always protect the people who couldn't protect themselves. 4, 3, ... Elena squeezed the trigger. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. The bullet shattered the window in a crystalline explosion, glass fragments catching the afternoon sunlight. As they rained down on the room below, Elena kept her eye pressed to the scope, desperately trying to see the results of her shot through the settling debris. For a moment that lasted forever, there was complete silence on the radio. Then Chung's voice crackled through. "Overwatch. That was incredible. You got one of them. Clean shot." Elena felt her breath rush out in a whoosh of relief, but she forced herself to stay focused. "Status of the package?" "She's alive, but we've still got 2 hostiles in the room. They've pulled back from the window, using the far wall for cover." Elena cursed quietly. Her shot had broken the tactical stalemate, but it hadn't ended it. Sarah was still in danger, and now the remaining captors would be even more desperate. "Can you advance now?" Elena asked. "Negative. They've barricaded themselves behind an overturned table. We'd have to cross 20 feet of open room to reach them, and they'd cut us down before we made it halfway." Elena studied the building through her scope, looking for any other advantage she could provide. The window was gone now, which gave her a clearer view into the room, but the angle was still all wrong. She could see the overturned table that the hostiles were using for cover, but she couldn't see the men themselves. "Ground team, can you tell me exactly where the package is positioned?" "Far corner of the room, near the window. She appears to be uninjured, but she's not moving much. Could be in shock." Elena swung her scope toward the corner Chun had indicated, and caught a glimpse of blonde hair and a blue shirt. Sarah Hutchinson was alive, but she was crouched in a position that would make any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. "We need to flush them out," Elena muttered, thinking aloud. "Say again." "Overwatch. The hostiles are using the table for cover, right? What if that cover disappeared?" There was a pause while Chun considered this. "You're talking about shooting through furniture at this distance. Even if you could penetrate their cover, you still couldn't see exactly where they were." Elena was already adjusting her position, looking for a better angle. The problem was fundamental. Her elevated position gave her a perfect view of most of the compound, but the geometry of the building worked against her when it came to the interior spaces. Unless ... "Ground team, what's directly below the room?" "Where the package is being held. Stand by." Elena could hear Chun conferring with his team. "The second floor appears to be some kind of office space. Why?" Elena was studying the building's exterior wall, noting the placement of windows on each floor. If she was right about the internal layout, there might be another option. "I need you to evacuate everyone from the building, except for your entry." "Team," Elena said. "All the way out, minimum 50-meter radius. Overwatch, what are you planning?" Elena chambered another round, this one different from the standard ball ammunition she'd been using. This cartridge was marked with a red tip high. Explosive incendiary, designed to penetrate armor and then detonate. I'm going to bring down their cover, she said. But I need to be sure there's no one below them when I do it. Jesus Christ, Chun breathed. You're talking about a structural shot. The support beam, Elena confirmed, centering her crosshairs on a specific point on the building's exterior wall. Her scope's ballistic computer was running calculations, showing her the precise angle needed to punch through the concrete and hit the steel support that held up that section of the third floor. Overwatch, that's insane. Even if you hit the beam, even if it works, the whole section could come down. Not the whole section, Elena said, studying the building's structural lines through her scope. Just enough to compromise their cover and create confusion. The building's designed to withstand seismic activity. One support beam won't bring down the entire floor. And if you're wrong? Elena thought about Sarah Hutchinson cowering in that room, about the countdown that had nearly ended her life moments ago. If I'm wrong, she dies anyway. This way she has a chance. There was a long pause before Chun responded. All right. Overwatch, we're clearing the building now. Give us 3 minutes. Elena used those 3 minutes to study every detail of her intended target. The support beam was embedded deep in the concrete wall, but her explosive round should have enough penetrating power to reach it. The question was whether she could hit a target the size of a dinner plate at over 1,200 meters while shooting through several inches of reinforced concrete. Building clear, Chun reported. You are cleared to engage. Elena settled into her firing position, adjusting her breathing to account for the adrenaline flooding her system. This shot was even more difficult than the precision shot through the window. She was aiming at a target she couldn't see, relying entirely on her knowledge of building construction and the ballistic computer's calculations. The crosshairs settled on the exact spot where the structural plans indicated the support beam should be. Elena's hands were rock steady now, the rifle's stabilization system working in perfect harmony with her own muscle memory. She squeezed the trigger. The explosive round struck the building's exterior wall with tremendous force, punching through the concrete and detonating inside the structural space behind it. Elena watched through her scope as cracks spiderwebbed across the wall, and a section of the third floor visibly sagged. Direct hit. Chun's voice was filled with amazement. The floor's compromised and ... Wait, movement in the room. The hostiles are trying to relocate. Elena swung her scope back to the shattered window, and this time she had a clear view of the chaos inside. The overturned table that had provided cover was now tilted at a crazy angle as the floor beneath it had shifted. One of the remaining hostiles was helping his companion, who appeared to be injured by falling debris, and Sarah Hutchinson was moving, crawling toward the damaged window. The package is mobile, Elena reported. She's trying to reach the window. We see her, Chun replied, moving to intercept. But the hostiles saw her too. Elena watched in horror as one of them raised his rifle, taking aim at Sarah as she scrambled across the tilted floor. This time, Elena didn't hesitate. Her third shot of the day was the most important. A precision shot through the damaged window at a target who was moving in a structurally compromised room. The crosshairs found their mark just as the hostile's finger tightened on his trigger. The man dropped, his rifle clattering harmlessly to the floor. Last hostile down, Elena reported. Package appears secure. Through her scope, she watched as Captain Chun and his team burst into the room, weapons raised and ready. But the fight was over. Sarah Hutchinson was alive, conscious, and reaching out gratefully as the Delta Force operators helped her to her feet. Package recovered. Chun's voice came through the radio, and Elena could hear the relief in his tone. She's shaken up but uninjured. Outstanding work, Overwatch. Elena finally allowed herself to slump back from her rifle, the adrenaline leaving her system all at once. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it was from exhaustion and relief. rather than her medical condition. Santos appeared beside her, having climbed back up the ridge during the firefight. "Senora, that was the most incredible shooting I have ever seen." "Just doing my job," Elena replied, but she was smiling. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. The tremor was still there, would probably always be there. But it didn't define her capabilities anymore. "Ground team to Overwatch," Chun's voice crackled through the radio. "We're beginning extraction now. Can you provide an overwatch for our egress?" Elena settled back behind her rifle, sweeping her scope across the compound. The diversionary attack was winding down, and the surviving defenders were beginning to regroup. Chun's team would need covering fire to make it safely to the extraction. "Point, copy ground team. I have eyes on your route. Move when ready." As she watched the rescue team escort Sarah Hutchinson out of the building, Elena felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the Colombian heat. This was why she'd become a sniper in the first place, not to take lives, but to save them. To be the guardian angel with a rifle, watching over those who couldn't protect themselves. Her satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Colonel Morrison. "Mission successful. Extraction helicopter inbound to your position. Well done." "Sergeant." Elena smiled at the rank. She wasn't a sergeant anymore, but today she'd remembered what it felt like to be a soldier again. The extraction helicopter was still 20 minutes out when Elena's world turned upside down. She was monitoring the rescue team's progress through her scope when Santos grabbed her arm urgently. "Senora, we have problems." Elena lifted her eye from the scope to see what had alarmed her guide. Santos was pointing toward the eastern ridge, where a line of armed figures was emerging from the tree line. Even at this distance, Elena could see they were well equipped and moving with military precision. "How many?" she asked, swinging her scope toward the new threat. "At least 20. Maybe more is coming." Elena studied the approaching force through her scope and felt her blood turn cold. These weren't local militia or drug cartel soldiers. They moved like special forces, and their equipment was top-tier military hardware. "Ground team, this is Overwatch," she transmitted urgently. "You have incoming hostiles from the east. Multiple contacts, heavily armed, moving to intercept your extraction route." Chun's voice came back immediately. "Copy, Overwatch. Can you identify?" Elena focused her scope on the lead elements of the approaching force. What she saw made her stomach drop. "Ground team, they're carrying U.S. weapons. M4 carbines, standard issue gear." "That's impossible," Chun replied. "All U.S. forces in the area are accounted for." But Elena was already reaching for her satellite phone, calling the encrypted number Morrison had given her for emergencies. When the colonel's voice came through, she could hear helicopters in the background. "Morrison here. Sir, we have a problem. There's another military force moving on the compound. They're carrying U.S. equipment and moving like American special forces." There was a long pause before Morrison responded. "Elena, where exactly are you seeing this force?" "Eastern Ridge, approximately 2 kilometers from the target compound." "Sir, who else did you send?" Another pause, longer this time. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was grim. "Elena, we didn't send anyone else. Chun's team is the only authorized U.S. presence in the area." Elena felt the world tilt around her. "Then who the hell are these people?" "Unknown." "But Elena, listen to me very carefully. Agent Webb's suspicions were correct. This entire operation has been compromised from the beginning." Elena's mind raced as the implications hit her. "The kidnapping was a setup. We believe so. Someone wanted to draw us into Colombian territory, wanted to get you special forces and a precision sniper into a specific location at a specific time." Elena was already packing up her rifle, her tactical instincts screaming at her to move. "Sir, if this is a trap, then Chun's team is walking into an ambush." Negative. Chun's team is the bait. Elena, you're the primary target. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Think about it. They specifically requested our best long-range shooter. They created a scenario that would require your exact skill set. They wanted you here, in this position, at this time. Elena's hands moved automatically, breaking down her rifle and packing her gear, even as her mind struggled to process what Morrison was telling her. Why? What do they want with me? We're not sure yet, but we have theories. Elena, you need to get out of there immediately. Santos knows extraction routes through the jungle. Elena looked at her guide, who was already shouldering his pack and preparing to move. But as she lifted her scope one more time to check on Chun's team, she saw something that made her freeze. The mysterious military force wasn't moving toward the compound, where Chun's team was extracting Sarah Hutchinson. They were moving directly toward Elena's position on the ridge. Sir, she said quietly into the phone, I don't think they want to capture me. What do you mean? Elena studied the approaching force through her binoculars. They were spreading out into a tactical formation, surrounding the base of the ridge. Escape routes were being systematically cut off. I think they want to kill me, she said. Morrison's voice became urgent. Elena, you need to move now. Santos will get you out. But when Elena turned to her guide, she found him standing 10 feet away with his rifle pointed at her chest. I am sorry, Senora, Santos said quietly. But I have my orders too. Elena stared at the man who had guided her through the jungle, who had shared water with her and warned her about patrols. The betrayal hit harder than any bullet could have. How long? She asked. From the beginning, Santos replied. The moment you arrived in Colombia. Elena's mind raced through the implications. If Santos had been compromised from the start, then everything, the route they'd taken, the timing of their arrival, even her precise shooting position, had been orchestrated by her enemies. Who are you working for? She demanded. Santos's expression was genuinely apologetic. People who have very long memories, Senora. People who remember what happened in Afghanistan. Afghanistan. Elena's blood went cold as pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. The arms dealer, Santos, the other Santos. This is about Miguel Santos. Miguel Santos was my cousin, Santos said quietly. And you killed many of his men when you destroyed his operation. Elena looked down at the compound below, where Chun's team was still evacuating with Sarah Hutchinson. They were proceeding according to plan, unaware that their overwatch had been compromised. The kidnapping, Elena said slowly. Sarah Hutchinson. It was all to get me here. See, my cousin's associates wanted revenge. But not just any revenge. They wanted to prove that the great American sniper could be beaten, humiliated. Elena's hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure rage. Used an innocent girl as bait. She will not be harmed, Santos said quickly. That was never the plan. Once you are dead, she will be released. Elena looked at her rifle case, calculating distances and odds. Santos was 10 feet away with his weapon trained on her. The approaching force was still minutes away but closing fast. Her satellite phone was still connected to Morrison, who was undoubtedly trying to organize some kind of rescue operation. But Elena had spent 8 years in the military, and she knew the math. Help was too far away, and Santos held all the tactical advantages, except for one thing. Santos, she said calmly, there's something you should know about my condition. Your tremor? What about it? Elena smiled grimly. It's not always a disadvantage. Before Santos could ask what she meant, Elena's tremor caused her to stumble slightly to the left. It looked completely natural, uncontrollable, and it put a large boulder between her and Santos's rifle. Elena had learned to use her condition to make it work for her instead of against her. The tremor that had ended her military career had also taught her how to move unpredictably, How to make her enemies misjudge her capabilities. She dove behind the boulder as Santos's first shot rang out, the bullet striking the stone where she'd been standing moments before. "Clever, Signora," Santos called out. "But you are trapped. My friends will be here soon." Elena activated her throat microphone. "Ground team, this is Overwatch. I am compromised. Santos is hostile. Repeat, Santos is hostile." Chun's voice came back immediately. "Overwatch, what's your status?" "Pinned down on the ridge. Multiple hostiles approaching my position. Continue with extraction. Do not attempt rescue." "Like hell," Chun replied. "We're coming for you. Negative." Elena shouted. "Your primary mission is the package. Get Sarah Hutchinson out of here." Elena peered around the boulder and saw Santos maneuvering to get a better angle on her position. He was good professional. Patient, deadly. But he was also trying to keep her alive long enough for his backup to arrive. That gave Elena an advantage. She opened her rifle case and began assembling the Barrett with practiced efficiency. If Santos wanted a sniper duel, she'd give him one. Elena had perhaps 3 minutes before the approaching force reached her position, and Santos wasn't going to give her those 3 minutes peacefully. She could hear him moving through the rocks, trying to flank her position while staying out of sight. The Barrett was assembled, but without a stable shooting position and with Santos actively hunting her, Elena couldn't use it effectively. The rifle was designed for long-range precision shooting, not close-quarters combat. She needed to change the game. Elena activated her satellite phone while keeping low behind the boulder. "Morrison, are you still there?" "I'm here, Elena. We're scrambling assets, but, sir, I need you to patch me through to Santos Miguel Santos, the arms dealer, in prison." "Elena, what the hell are you thinking? Trust me, sir. If I'm right, he's the only one who can call off his cousin." There was a pause filled with gunfire as Santos probed her position with carefully aimed shots. Then Morrison came back on the line. "You've got 5 minutes. I'm patching you through to a DX Florence." Elena waited, listening to the connection being established while she tracked Santos's movement through the sound of his footsteps on loose rock. He was circling around to her right, trying to get above her position. "Who is this?" The voice that came through the phone was heavily accented, suspicious. "Miguel Santos? Who wants to know?" "Sergeant Elena Vasquez, U.S. Army, the sniper who destroyed your operation in Afghanistan." There was a long silence. Then, the woman with the shaking hands. "That's right. Your cousin has me pinned down in Colombia. He's trying to kill me." "Good. You cost me millions of dollars and many good men." Elena shifted position as another shot from Santos sparked off the rocks near her head. "Your cousin is using an innocent American girl as bait. A college student who never hurt anyone. This is not my concern." "It should be," Elena said urgently. "Because when this is over, when your cousin murders an American civilian on Colombian soil, the full weight of the U.S. military is going to come down on your entire organization. Everyone you've ever worked with, everyone who's ever helped you, everyone who's ever taken your money, they're all going to pay." Another silence, this one shorter. "You are trying to save yourself. I'm trying to save everyone," Elena replied. "Your cousin, your organization, that innocent girl, all of them." Elena could hear Santos, the cousin, getting closer. Maybe 2 minutes before he reached a position where her cover wouldn't matter. "Miguel," she continued, "you're a businessman. A smart one, or you wouldn't have built the operation you had. Think about the math. Is killing one American soldier worth destroying everything you've built over the past 20 years? She heard movement in the rocks above her position. Santos was almost in place for his final assault. "Besides," Elena added, playing her last card, "wouldn't it be more satisfying to beat me fair and square? To prove that your cousin is the better sniper?" Miguel Santos laughed, a sound like grinding steel. "You want a duel? At your age, with your condition? I want a chance, Elena said. One shot each from equal positions. If your cousin wins, I'm dead and your honor is satisfied. If I win, everyone walks away. And why would I agree to this? Because, Elena said, chambering around in the Barrett, it's the only way anyone survives the next 10 minutes. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. Then, put my cousin on the phone. Elena cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, Santos, your cousin wants to talk to you. The shooting stopped. A moment later, Santos called back, impossible. Miguel is in American prison. Check your phone, Elena shouted back. She waited, listening to the sound of Santos pulling out his satellite phone and answering a call. The conversation was rapid-fire Spanish, too quick and too distant for Elena to follow, but she could hear the tone Miguel giving orders, Santos arguing, then finally accepting. 5 minutes later, Santos appeared on a ridge approximately 800 meters from Elena's position. He was carrying a sniper rifle of his own, looked like a Russian. Dragunov from this distance. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message, 1 shot each. Simultaneous count. Winner takes all. Elena positioned herself carefully, using the rocks to create a stable shooting platform. At 800 meters, Santos would be a challenging target, but not an impossible one. The question was whether her tremor would interfere with her accuracy under pressure. She activated the Barrett's stabilization system and settled behind the scope. Santos was visible on the opposite ridge, setting up his own shooting position. With professional efficiency. Ready? Santos called across the distance. Elena centered her crosshairs on his position. At this range, she could see him clearly through her scope, a competent soldier doing a job he believed in, even if that job was killing her. Ready, she called back. On 3, Santos shouted. 1. Elena controlled her breathing, finding the rhythm she'd learned over thousands of hours of training. 2. The crosshairs were steady, locked on target. Elena's finger found the trigger. 3. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, echoing off the mountain ridges like thunder. Elena felt something punch into the rock beside her head, sending stone fragments across her cheek. Santos had missed by inches, close enough to draw blood, but not close enough to kill. Through her scope, Elena watched Santos topple backward from his shooting position and lie still. Her phone buzzed immediately. Miguel Santos, calling from prison. It is finished, the arms dealer said when she answered. My cousin is dead. The debt is paid. The girl will be released unharmed. Elena slumped back against the boulder, suddenly exhausted. And the force that was approaching my position? They will withdraw. This was a matter of family honor, not politics. With my cousin dead, there is no more honor to be won. Elena looked through her scope one more time, confirming that Santos wasn't moving. A clean shot, center mass. He would have died instantly. Why? She asked Miguel. Why agree to the duel? You could have just let your cousin kill me. Miguel was quiet for a moment. Because you were right about mathematics, and because ... He paused. Because my cousin was not as good a shot as he believed himself to be. Elena's satellite phone crackled with another incoming call. Morrison. Elena, what's your status? Threat. Neutralized, sir. Santos is down, and the approaching force is withdrawing. Outstanding. Extraction helicopter is inbound to your position. ETA 15 minutes. Elena began breaking down her rifle, her hands steady now that the immediate danger had passed. As she worked, she noticed something strange. Her tremor seemed less pronounced than it had been that morning. Not gone, probably never gone, but manageable. Maybe it had never been about the tremor at all. Maybe it had been about learning to work with it instead of fighting against it. 15 minutes later, as the extraction helicopter settled onto the ridge, Elena took one last look at the Colombian jungle spread out below her. Somewhere down there, Sarah Hutchinson was safe with Chun's extraction team. probably already on her way home to her family. Elena had saved a life today. More than that, she'd remembered who she was underneath the trauma and the medical discharge and the self-doubt. She was a soldier. And soldiers protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The tremor in her hands was just a reminder of the price she'd paid for that privilege. But it wasn't the end of her story. It was just a new chapter. Elena was halfway to the extraction helicopter when her satellite phone rang again. The display showed Morrison's number, but something in the tone of the ringing made her hesitate. "Colonel?" She answered. "Elena, don't get on that helicopter." The words hit her like ice water. Elena stopped walking, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. "Sir, what's wrong?" "We've been monitoring communications. The helicopter approaching your position isn't ours." Elena spun around, studying the aircraft that was now less than 50 meters away. It looked like a standard military transport, the kind the U.S. used for extraction operations. But as she watched more carefully, she noticed subtle differences. The rotor configuration was slightly off, and there were no visible markings. "Then whose is it?" "Unknown." "Elena, you need to get out of there now." The helicopter was settling onto the ridge, its rotors creating a whirlwind of dust and debris. Elena could see figures inside, armed men wearing tactical gear. As the side door slid open, she caught a glimpse of weapons being raised. Elena dove behind the nearest boulder as automatic weapons fire erupted from the helicopter. Bullets sparked off rocks around her position, and she could hear the distinctive whine of ricochets as rounds bounced off stone. "Morrison!" she shouted into her phone over the gunfire. "I thought Miguel Santos called off his people." "He did. This is someone else entirely." Elena's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. Santos was dead, his force had withdrawn, and Sarah Hutchinson was safely extracted. Who else had a reason to want her dead? The answer came to her with sickening clarity. "Agent Webb." She whispered, "What?" Morrison's voice crackled through the phone. "Double quote, sir. Where is Agent Webb right now?" There was a pause while Morrison checked. "He's Elena. He's supposed to be coordinating the extraction with Colombian authorities." "Why?" Elena peered around her cover and saw armed men deploying from the helicopter, spreading out to surround her position. They moved with military precision. But there was something familiar about their equipment and tactics. "Because I think he's the one who's been orchestrating this entire operation." Elena thought back through everything that had happened. Webb had been the one to suggest the kidnapping was a setup. He'd known details about the compound that seemed too accurate for standard intelligence. He'd been present for every briefing, aware of every tactical decision. "Morrison, think about it," Elena said urgently as gunfire continued to take her position. "Who would have access to Colombian Special Forces gear? Who could arrange for a fake extraction helicopter? Who knew exactly where I'd be and when?" "Jesus Christ," Morrison breathed. "Elena, if you're right, if I'm right, then Webb has been playing both sides from the beginning. He probably arranged the kidnapping, fed intelligence to Santos's cousin, and now he's here to clean up the loose ends." Elena's position was becoming untenable. The armed men from the helicopter were advancing from multiple directions, and she was running low on ammunition. Worse, she was still carrying the Barrett, which was useless in a close-quarters firefight. "Sir, I need immediate extraction, real extraction this time." "Elena, our nearest assets are 30 minutes out." "Can you hold that long?" Elena assessed her tactical situation. 8 to 10 hostiles with automatic weapons, elevated position, superior numbers, and firepower, against one sniper with a pistol and maybe 20 rounds of ammunition. "I'll let you know," she said grimly. Elena made a difficult decision. She broke down the Barrett as quickly as possible, stuffing the critical components into her pack while leaving the heavier parts behind. If she survived the next 30 minutes, she could always build another rifle. But the Barretts advanced. Scope and trigger assembly were irreplaceable. The attacking force was closing in, using classic fire and movement tactics to advance while maintaining suppressive fire. Elena recognized the technique. It was straight out of U.S. Army training manuals, which confirmed her suspicions about Agent Webb. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop running, Vasquez. You're only making this harder on yourself." Elena replied quickly, "Webb?" The response came immediately. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. You always were too observant for your own good." Elena shifted position, using the terrain to stay ahead of the advancing soldiers. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" "Afghanistan. You destroyed a very profitable operation when you took down Santos. Cost my associates millions of dollars." "Your associates? Did you really think Santos was operating independently? His arms-dealing business was just one small part of a much larger enterprise. An enterprise that doesn't appreciate interference from idealistic soldiers." Elena was starting to understand the scope of what she'd stumbled into. "How long have you been working for them?" "Long enough to ensure that certain operations proceed without U.S. military interference. Your little crusade in Afghanistan upset the balance of power in the region." Elena reached the edge of the ridge and looked down into the valley below. It was a sheer drop of maybe 200 feet to the jungle canopy. Not survivable, but possibly preferable to whatever Webb had planned for her. The kidnapping was never about revenge, Elena realized. It was about removing me as a threat. Very good. Santos's cousin was a convenient tool, but this operation was always about permanent solutions to ongoing problems. Elena could hear the soldiers getting closer. Maybe 5 minutes before they reached her position. She needed a miracle, or at least a very good plan. Her phone rang. Morrison again. "Elena, we've confirmed your suspicions about Webb. He's been under investigation by Internal Affairs for 6 months. Financial irregularities, suspicious contacts, the works. Great timing on that investigation, sir." "Elena, listen carefully. We have assets moving to your position, but they're still 20 minutes out. Can you get to the extraction point Delta?" Elena checked her GPS coordinates against the tactical map Morrison had given her that morning. Extraction point Delta was 2 kilometers away through dense jungle, down the backside of the ridge. "Even if I could get there," Elena said, "how do I know it's not another trap?" "Because I'm personally flying the extraction helicopter this time. And Elena, I've got backup coming with me." Elena made her decision. She couldn't fight 8 soldiers with superior positioning and firepower, but she could run. And running through jungle terrain was something she'd trained for extensively. She slipped over the edge of the ridge, beginning a controlled descent down the steep slope. Behind her, she could hear shouts as Webb's soldiers realized she was no longer in her defensive position. "Find her." Webb's voice carried clearly through the mountain air. "She can't have gone far." Elena smiled grimly as she disappeared into the jungle canopy. Webb was about to learn the same lesson that countless enemies had learned over the years. You don't hunt a sniper in her element. The hunter had become the hunted. But Elena Vasquez was nobody's prey. The jungle that had seemed like an obstacle that morning now felt like an old friend. Elena moved through the dense undergrowth with practiced efficiency, using every technique she'd learned in 8 years of military service. Sound discipline, route selection, camouflage, all the skills that had kept her alive in Afghanistan were serving her well in Colombia. Behind her, she could hear Webb's soldiers crashing through the vegetation like bulldozers. They were well trained, but they were used to urban environments and open terrain. The jungle was foreign territory for them. While Elena had spent months training in similar conditions, Elena's phone vibrated with another text from Webb. "You can't run forever, Vasquez. I know these mountains better than you do." Elena paused long enough to reply, "Want a bet?" She continued her descent toward the valley floor. choosing a route that would be difficult for her pursuers to follow. Steep ravines, dense bamboo thickets, areas where the canopy was so thick that visibility dropped to just a few meters. 20 minutes into her escape, Elena heard something that made her freeze in place. Helicopter rotors. She looked up through the canopy and caught glimpses of an aircraft circling overhead. Webb had called in air support, probably equipped with thermal imaging that could track her movement through the jungle. Elena's phone rang. Morrison. Elena, we're tracking the helicopter in your area. Is that yours or theirs? Theirs, Elena replied, quietly, staying hidden beneath a fallen log. They're hunting me from the air. Shit, Elena, that changes the tactical situation significantly. Elena knew Morrison was right. Moving through jungle was one thing, but evading thermal imaging from the air was nearly impossible. The helicopter would be able to track her heat signature regardless of how well she hid in the vegetation. Elena remembered something from her survival training. Thermal imaging detected heat differentials, but water could mask or confuse those signatures. And she could hear running water nearby, a stream flowing down the mountain toward the valley floor. Morrison, I'm going to be out of contact for a while, Elena said. If you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, assume I've been captured. Elena, what are you planning? Something stupid, Elena replied, and turned off her phone. Elena found the stream 50 meters from her position, a fast-flowing mountain creek about 3 feet deep and 10 feet wide. The water was shockingly cold. Fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. Elena waded into the stream and began moving downstream, staying low to keep her profile hidden. The cold water was miserable, but it would help mask her thermal signature from the helicopter above. For 20 minutes, Elena followed the stream as it wound its way down the mountain. The current was strong enough that she had to be careful not to lose her footing, but the noise of the rushing water helped mask any sounds she made. She could still hear the helicopter circling overhead, but the pilot seemed to be having trouble maintaining contact with her heat signature. Elena's phone, sealed in a waterproof case, buzzed with an incoming call. Morrison again. Elena, are you all right? We lost your GPS signal. I'm in the water, Elena explained quietly. It's masking my thermal signature, but I can't stay here forever. Understood. Elena, we have good news and bad news. Give me the bad news first. Webb has called in additional assets. We're tracking at least 3 helicopters in the area now, and there are ground teams moving to cut off your escape routes. Elena's heart sank. 3 helicopters meant thermal imaging, communications intercept, and probably armed support. She was one person with limited ammunition, moving through terrain that was increasingly controlled by her enemies. What's the good news? The good news is that I'm 5 minutes out with a full Delta Force team. If you can make it to Extraction Point Delta, we can get you out of there. Elena checked her GPS position. She was still over a kilometer from the extraction point, and the terrain between her and safety was getting more difficult. Morrison, there's something else you should know, Elena said. I think Webb's operation is bigger than just eliminating me. The equipment these people have, the coordination, the resources. This is a major intelligence operation. What do you mean? I mean, I think we've stumbled into something that goes way beyond arms dealing or revenge. These people have access to you as military assets. They know our procedures. They've been able to track classified operations. Elena paused as the helicopter noise grew louder overhead. They were widening their search pattern, probably trying to pick up her trail where she'd left the stream. Morrison, what if the real target wasn't me at all? What if the real target was to demonstrate that they could compromise U.S. operations at will? Jesus, Elena, you think this is espionage? I think this is a test run, Elena replied. They wanted to see if they could manipulate our intelligence services, control our tactical responses, and eliminate our assets without detection. I'm not the target, I'm the proof of concept. The implications were staggering. If Webb's organization could orchestrate something this complex, if they had infiltrated U.S. intelligence services to this degree, then national security was compromised at levels nobody had imagined. Elena reached a point where the stream joined a larger river, and she had to make a decision. Following the river would provide continued thermal cover, but it would also take her away from the extraction point. Leaving the water would expose her to the helicopters but give her a direct route to safety. She chose a third option. Elena climbed out of the stream and immediately began gathering materials from the jungle floor: dead leaves, moss, mud, anything that would help camouflage her heat signature. She covered herself with vegetation and waited. The helicopter passed directly overhead, its thermal imaging sweeping the area where she lay hidden. Elena held her breath, pressing herself into the jungle floor and praying that her improvised camouflage would be enough. The helicopter moved on. Elena waited another 5 minutes, then began moving again, staying low and using the densest vegetation she could find. The extraction point was just 500 meters away now, but it might as well have been on the moon. Her phone buzzed with another text from Webb. "Last chance, Vasquez. Surrender now and this ends quickly." Elena typed back, "Come and get me." She was done running. Time to remind Agent Webb who he was dealing with. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tales. What kind of story would you like to hear next? Elena reached the extraction point with 2 minutes to spare. Extraction Point Delta was a small clearing on a ridgeline, just large enough for a helicopter to land. Elena positioned herself at the edge of the tree line and waited, her rifle assembled and ready. She had chambered her last .50 caliber round. After this, she'd be down to her sidearm and whatever she could improvise.